trending is better than anybody in the world. I've been trending my whole life. From the day I was born, I've been trending.
I like the good publicity and I like the bad publicity. It all plays.
I went to an Ivy League school. I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words.
22 days in a row or something on the cover of the tabloids. It's never been anything like that.
I know what trending
Get
is.
to Ray Global with me, Shita Mitra.
And I'm Shashank Matu.
So today's top news comes from United States. We know that Donald Trump has been sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. He delivered his inaugural address, and then after that we've seen that he's been signing one executive order after another.
That's right.
So today we'll decode what his orders mean for US and for the world, and what his inaugural address was about, what were the key statements, and what can we basically make out of how his first day has been in presidency.
Right.
So let's begin with his inaugural address. There was nothing new that he really added, but the way he delivered, how calm and composed he appeared, and even when he was delivering his attacks on Biden, he did not, even smile. So what do you make of those statements? Do you think, that the Trump of 2017 and compared to Trump of today, how has it changed? And also, what do you make of the inaugural address at large?
Right. It was an address that I think differed very, very starkly from how he spoke on the campaign trail. On this campaign trail, he seemed to, try and connect with his voters, so on and so forth. I think here it was very direct,
Yeah, this time it was
very
like,
direct
I'm here.
messaging, very firm messaging. It wasn't. He was very, very critical of his opponents. He said that, very clearly that the establishment that preceded him, which is Joe Biden's administration, was essentially involved in corruption, and Joe Biden was sitting right behind him. So that was
America was in
something.
decline
Exactly.
under
He's
Biden.
basically said that America's age of decline is now over. He talked about the political persecution that he had faced, about his political comeback, about the assassination attempts on his life as well. So I think striking a grim tone about where America has come from, but then also saying that he intends to bring in radical changes to how the America.
This hopeful tone to his.
Exactly. I wouldn't say the tone was hopeful necessarily, but I think it was sort of gave me the impression of someone saying that I'm going to drag this country into a better age. I'm going to change our immigration policies. I'm going to change our policies on a whole slew of issues, for example, on diversity, equity, inclusion, so on and so forth, on the American military and how socially inclusive it is meant to be. So he has taken a position very, very strongly on these issues. So it was very much, it was muted in its tone, but it was 100% a combative, very combative speech. So setting the tone for what his presidency might look like.
Exactly, so he basically laid out a plan of what 4 years under him would look like in America. And then just after the inaugural address, he started signing orders, which basically cement his policy. So let's talk about them. He signed over 70 orders as of now, and this is way more than he signed in his previous term, in 4 years. So on the very first day, he signed orders with regards to immigration, economy, social policies. So let's begin with immigration. What are the orders that he signed in this regard, and what are the changes that we could see on that front?
Right. So, one of the big things that Trump has basically talked about is the southern border, which is that over the last
Mexico, US
couple of,
border.
Mexico, the large number of Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, so on and so forth, that have had a very, very difficult economic and political situations in their countries over the last couple of years. And because of that, large numbers of migrants, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have tried to migrate into the United States, many of them illegally, of course, some have been applying for asylum. And because of that, that has become a major political issue. And if you know anything about Donald Trump, you know that immigration and illegal immigration is something that gets his base going like nothing else. So
that was his plank for this election.
Exactly, that was absolutely the plan for his election. So what he's basically saying is that he has deployed a national emergency on the southern border. He was very, very critical of how the Biden administration and particularly Kamala Harris handled the southern border. They said that you have essentially made this a free-for-all. You have not given our enforcement authorities the kind of resources that they need to enforce, to bring down illegal immigration. So both in his inauguration address, he basically said that, look, we are going to enact a set of policies that are going to basically ensure that countries like Mexico, countries like Central American countries that, of course, neighboring America, will not be able to send in large numbers of people into the United States, and of course that the resources of the Pentagon, of the American government, will be deployed in such a way that there will be a national emergency on the southern border. He's also ended the use of an app that migrants who are applying for asylum can use to apply for asylum in the United States. So he's ended the use of that app as well. So these are just some of the top line issues.
And it's not just about the inflow of people, it's also about the inflow of drugs as well, right? He's also declared that all the cartels will now be declared as terrorist organizations.
Right, absolutely.
Right. So how do you assess that? Because we have seen that, he's threatened tariffs on Mexico, saying that you need fentanyl trade that happens across the border,
absolutely.
right?
No, that's going to be a massive issue, because I think what is a story that gets underreported in India as well as other parts of the world is what has happened in America over the last couple of years, just the drugs epidemic, the opioids epidemic, lots of concerns about these issues. J.D. Vance, who is of course now vice president, has spoken very, very openly about things like this, about the flow of drugs. People have criticized him for it, but this is 100% a talking point that tens of thousands of people have suffered in the United States because of this flow of fentanyl as well as drugs into the United States. That is something he wants to combat. So he's taking a very, very strong tone. He's also, for example, with China, in one of the few the conversation that he had with Xi Jinping right before the inauguration, he also brought up the question of fentanyl, and it's one of the few areas where, in fact, very clearly it seems that the Trump administration wants to cooperate with the Chinese government. So you're absolutely right. It is 100% a top priority for his government.
All right. And it's not just this sector where he's declared an emergency. When it comes to energy sector, he's also declared energy emergency in America. So let's talk about the orders that he signed with regards to economy and energy together, because we've seen that, he's targeted the inflation that has been growing under Biden administration. He said that he's going to control the cost of living crisis that Americans have been facing. So let's talk about that. What are the changes that we could see in with regards to that?
Right. So you're absolutely right. There's a cost of living crisis in the United States, inflation. This is something that really broke the back of the Biden administration. One of the key reasons why Kamala Harris lost the election was that despite the fact that, if you read anything about the American economy, you would see that it did in some senses outperform many other developed economies. Job growth was strong, but inflation was that persistent bugbear. Prices just kept inching up. Ordinary households just felt that they weren't better off economically, and therefore the cost of living was something that really ushered Donald Trump in, because the economy was one of his big strengths in the election campaign. So he's been very clear that he's passed an order on cost of living, on trying to bring down prices for ordinary Americans, because this is again an absolutely core issue for his base. His Republicans generally over a long period of time have had this record of somehow being stronger in the economy. Every party has its brand. Exactly, right? Stronger on defense, stronger on the economy, and Donald Trump especially, because of, when you think about politicians, there are a couple of things that stuck in your head about their brand. And with Trump, it's business and it's the economy, which is also one of the reasons why he was elected. So yes, he's passed an executive order looking at exactly this issue of how can we control prices, how can we bring down prices in order to ensure that working families are better taken care of. So that is, again, like I said, a top priority, along with what you were saying about fentanyl, drugs, and so on and so forth.
Exactly, and it's also freezed hirings in the federal department as well. So we've covered defense, we've covered border control, security, economy. Now let's come to the social changes that he's trying to bring through his executive orders. We have seen that, he's been targeting gay rights. He's declared that there will only be two genders in America now, male and female. And he's also brought some changes with regards to diversity and inclusion programs. So how do you see those changes now?
No, I think I think Donald Trump is one of those people who has 100% taken a strong line on America's culture wars. He's picked a side, and he knows that it will get parts of his base going. So yes, he's absolutely been a big, he's I think cotton on. I've never really seen Donald Trump as someone who is deeply ideological about these questions, but he understands. For example, if you go back to the 1980s and 1990s, he understands his base well. That's his thing. I don't think that he's someone who's particularly doctrinaire on issues like abortion and so on and so forth.
We did not see any strong statement coming out of him.
If you would recall, I think Ishita and I were here
during the debate.
During the debates, exactly, right? When we had the Trump debates and we had the J.D. Vance debate with Tim Walz, the vice presidential debates, and there you could see that Trump and Vance knew that this was an emotive issue, and they sort of deflected it. They said, look, we want to take this issue to the states, let the states decide, which is a typical thing that the Republicans say, right? Something you won't hear many parties say in India. But anyway, the point being that this is something that I don't think Trump is himself very doctrinaire or ideological on these issues, but 100%. People that he has picked in his cabinet, like Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, are 100% doctrinaire on these issues. He knows that culture wars, this sense of America's culture is changing, and some people are being left behind. They feel increasingly alienated by what is happening. He has understood that sense of
to restore
enemy,
America
that
back
drift.
to its glory.
Exactly, right. So he's understood that sense of drift, and he's saying that look, we're going to restore America to what it used to be. So he's again very clearly speaking to his base. There's always a political subtext, and this is one of them. I don't think he's doctrinaire about it, but he knows what it means to people who vote for him and what it means to people who don't vote for him. I think you would recall, Ishita and I, when the election campaign was still happening, because we used to cover race for the White House, he used to do it every day. I remember there was a campaign ad that said, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. Right, and that was something that whatever you think about it, whatever your views on the issue, it was as clear a form of communication as you could. That look, these are
we're targeting the woke virus. That
exactly the woke virus.
Americans.
Exactly, right. So he's saying that look, I'm going to go down against the woke virus. I'm going to take it down.
And
I'm going to fight
Elon
against
Musk,
it.
he's also he's also taken a very strong stance on
Exactly.
these issues.
Yeah.
So I think his influence definitely becomes a factor in this.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, in fact, and we'll have a good interview with between our news director here at India Today, Rahul Kaval, and Ian Bremmer, one of the world's best geopolitical analysts. Of course, it's going to go up on our channel soon, so you can catch it there. And they actually have a huge conversation about exactly this question about Elon Musk and his role in the Trump administration.
He's becoming the best buddy.
Yeah, best buddy. Someone said really the second most powerful man in the United States at this point in time, in terms of his wealth, in terms of the fact that he owns one of the most powerful social media platforms in the world, and of course because he's now very proximate to political power. So he's in a very good position at this point in time. Yeah.
Exactly. So now moving on from immigration, economy, from social changes to now multilateralism, we have seen that Trump has always been critical of the way the world order has been operating so far. He's been critical of the international organizations, and in line with that, his thinking. So he's now withdrawn from WHO, and he's also been very critical of the organization, and he's not shied away from expressing his criticism. He said that the organization is very much influenced by China, and it did not handle COVID pandemic well or other crises well. And also we've seen that Paris climate accord, now US is also withdrawn from that.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you see the fight against climate change now going on globally, with US withdrawing from climate accord and also from WHO? How do you see that change?
I think to understand this, we have to go back to Donald Trump's first principles, right? What does he think about international rules, multilateral institutions? He's not a fan of them. I think his view often is that these are bankrolled by the United States. They increasingly don't work. Therefore, it's a lot of countries placing rules, regulations, burdens on the United States, which is effectively the indispensable country when it comes to running a lot of these organizations like the United Nations, like let's say the World Trade Organization, so on and so forth. So his view is very much that look, it imposes a lot of rules, regulations, burdens on us. Countries are essentially taking advantage of us. And if we simply unchained ourselves and said, look, we're the most powerful country in the world, we can essentially do as we please, and you will simply have to suffer it, we will get a much better deal. So his view when it comes to international organizations more generally, and this is not just something that has come up with Donald Trump. In the 1990s, Ishita, America actually had a massive funding problem with the United Nations. They refused to fund the UN for a little while. And this was a huge funding crisis because every country has to has to give money to the United Nations for it to continue. And the reason why it didn't was America increasingly felt that its interests were not being represented by the United Nations. A lot of these international organizations really, when America says the rules-based order, when it says international institutions, these were institutions created by America after the Second World War. Yes, to represent the world more equitably, but also to bake in its power, right? It wanted its power to be fully represented. That's why the World Trade Organization, the World Bank always has an American president. The World Trade Organization, of course, was America had a major role in the creation of those organizations. All of these organizations were created by America to serve its interests. So it agreed to take some rules on, but it agreed to take on those rules, and it also expected to gain benefits. Now the view from Donald Trump is we are not we're not getting benefits. People are placing rules on us. We have to fund these organizations as well. And so I think Donald Trump feels that we're being taken advantage of. On trade, we have the World Trade Organization, we were taken advantage of by China. We have NATO to guarantee European security, but European countries can barely fight themselves. We have to contribute everything. Paris Climate Accords, yes, the world is placing rules and obligations on us, but we as a developed country have to foot more of the bill, whereas China isn't doing enough to combat climate change and so on and so forth, and neither is India and so on. So the entire view from Donald Trump is, if you look at defense, if you look at trade, if you look at the United Nations, the view is they want American money, they want American dollars, they want American investment, but we get very little for it.
US as a victim of the changing world order now.
Exactly. I think that the sense was that, look, this was put into place to safeguard American interests. I think
it's no longer doing
it's
so.
no longer doing that. It's more a burden. It is constraining America's freedom of movement. So what Donald Trump essentially, everyone always says is he is a deal maker. America made a deal in 1945. It wants a new deal now, and that's what you're seeing. I think with America pushing back against a lot of these institutions, that they say, look, we want a new deal. Right?
Yeah,
World Trade Organization is broken. China can't give subsidies to its public sector enterprises and just get away with it. We want a better deal on that. We want a better deal on the World Health Organization. We want a better deal on climate change. If you won't give it to us, we're the most powerful country in the world. What are you going to do? And that's the thing. The fundamental thing you need to understand about Donald Trump is that he is America unvarnished. He is not like Biden, a restrained figure, right? There is a sense of rules, restraint. America behaves a certain way in the world. I don't think Donald Trump really.
He doesn't go by the book.
He doesn't go by the book. I think he very much is happy to use his weight. He's happy to throw his weight around, push countries, threaten the invasion of Greenland, threaten to take back the Panama Canal by military force. He's willing to do all of that to get a better deal. It's a very different sense of how America should look, feel, behave. Someone said, I think on Twitter very recently, that over the last couple of decades, really, America has tried to be a kinder, gentler force on the global stage because, if you're the most powerful country in the world and you're the only superpower, a lot of people are going to be scared of your influence. You want everyone to feel at ease with you. So America was like, okay, we want everyone to feel at ease with us, so we will be a kinder, gentle nation on the world stage. But now it's competitive again. Yeah, now it's competitive again.
Not that
exactly.
much.
You have China. America feels taken advantage of. Global growth has slowed down. We're in a much more competitive environment. So the chains come off, the gloves come off, and America's like, okay, we're back to being competitive again. So I think that's maybe the broader sense that
exactly. Transactionalism is basically how Donald Trump operates and approaches issues when it comes to other countries. And also, you see, so somebody mentioned, I was having the same discussion, that for Trump, tariff is not really an important issue, but the threat of tariff. So basically, for him, it's basically a way to bring everyone on the negotiating table back, and then America will place its conditions that this is how we're going to do it. So whether you agree to it or not.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's basically it. I think that's what I'm saying, right? That he is much more willing, and I think this is why in India here as well it matters to us, because he's much more willing to throw his weight around, use America's power to get what he wants. So that's something that India will have to be very used to. The Biden administration moved in particular ways. It had a particular, shall we say, there's that word in Urdu, tehzeeb. There's a way of behaving. Donald Trump, much less so. I think he's writing his own rule book as such.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of issues that basically he highlighted in his inaugural address or basically signed orders for. So, just briefly, because you mentioned this, that, he's been reversing a lot of decisions that were taken during Biden administration. So how do you think, how do you visualize America's role going forward under Trump as compared to how it was under Biden? Of course, you've explained some parts of it. So just briefly, if you could just also shed light on this.
Or towards India or towards the world more generally?
Towards the world.
Towards the world. Look, I think that, like I said, a lot more transactionalism. We've already seen these two decisions come through. So less patience with multilateral institutions. So, for example, the Paris Climate Accords, he's just pulled out. He's pulled out of the World Health Organization, citing, the amount of money it takes from the United States. Again, a sense that international institutions mooch our money and take it from us and don't really do anything.
He's also been very critical of WTO as well.
Exactly, World Trade Organization. So that's one thing. So much less patience with international institutions is one absolute feature of the Trump administration. The second thing is, of course, that he wants to end conflicts. His view is very, very clearly, and this is again coming back to what we were saying about Trump and how he sees the world more generally. It's that, if you're Donald Trump, someone who grew up in 1946, you were 25 years old when America sort of pulled out of Vietnam, which was seen as a disastrous conflict. You have lived through the Iraq War, Afghanistan. Now, you were president and you were very popular. That was a popular policy. There's a general fatigue in America about getting involved in foreign conflicts and having to essentially.
And he's highlighted that is in
exactly. Why do we have to be on the beck and call for everything that happens anywhere in the world, right? Like, why, if something happens in Nigeria, does America have to be called? Why if the Rwandan genocide is happening in the 1990s, why does America have to always foot the bill? So that's a frustration that a lot of people in America have, and he's channeling that. So I think that you're going to see that a lot more, right? Where he's willing to put pressure. He's put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel to say that, listen, you need to accept the ceasefire deal because I am the guy who ends wars. I don't start them. So I will end conflicts, and it is very domestically helpful. Whether that'll work, we don't know. But on Ukraine as well, he's likely to push for an end to the conflict. So that is something you are very much likely to see as well. So end to some conflicts, much less patience with international institutions, definitely a lot more transactionalism. I think he's going to continue to push a number of European countries, a number of Asian countries to do more on their own. to pay more if they want American help, but also to do more on their own, which is why India, in some senses, fits in so well with this. And if I may also say, there's one point I want to make actually, and this is something that S. Jaishankar, our foreign minister, was just talking about, and I think that this is very critical in terms of how India sees the Trump administration. Right? He said that look, over the last 75 years, there has been an international order that has been set up after the end of the Second World War. Right? Now all of that is shifting. Right? Europe, which was a big beneficiary of the Second World War, the post-World War II order. The continent got more integrated. They were richer. America provided for their defense. Things worked out for them broadly, right? The Cold War ended. Europe and the West were triumphant. It was good for them. But now you see so many European countries, and I've traveled in a lot of European countries. There's so much. There's a sense of how should I say? A lack of roots, right? The sense is they're unbalanced, they're off balance completely because their economic models have faced a lot of issues. They're facing a war on their continent. Their biggest military ally, America, is increasingly impatient with Europe. There's an increasing sense that the international order is shifting around them,
so
and they don't know.
Identity crisis. Where do they belong?
Where do they belong? Exactly. And India is one of those countries that is looking at this and says, wait, that's good for us.
Yeah, because now we can make our identity in this order.
Exactly, you're absolutely right. Because we are so big, because the West, the dominance of the West and Japan and South Korea and all these countries was baked in. And everyone else was just there. Right? Now China has come up. The competition with China has meant that, oh my God, the international system is changing. The Western powers are saying, America is saying, okay, look, European countries can barely fight a war in Europe on their own. We need countries to help us that are responsible, that have the power to take on these new challenges. Let's bring India and let's cut India a better deal. Let's bring them into the international system more. So that America is looking to cut new deals with new countries that are willing to take on more of the responsibilities. And that's why India looks at Donald Trump's transactionalism and says, holy hell, that works for us really, really well, because he wants to change the rules. He wants to upend the old order. He wants to redo relationships with allies and say, okay, we're in for that, because we want a greater role, we want a greater responsibility, we want less interference. Help us do that when we want your support to take on China. So, in fact, the rise of China, the geopolitical divisions between America and China, the relative decline of Europe, all of these things have created for India an opportunity where you're saying, hey, we can rise, we can take on more of a responsibility. America now has an interest to build us up here in India as the primary Indian Ocean power, give us defense technology, give us economic investment, so on and so forth. So that's what Jaishankar was saying, and I think that's very key as to how India is looking at this. That he's tossed the chess piece. He's thrown open the exactly. He shattered the jigsaw puzzle, but now the jigsaw puzzle has to be put back together, and India can put it back or can help put it back in a way that suits India much better. Right? The picture changes, and India can help change it. That's the view.
All right, well, that's the message that we'll end this live with, that US is no longer the watchguard of the world. It's going to deal with other countries on its own terms and conditions, and it's not going to cut you slack anymore, If you're not benefiting it, then it won't really, come in your way. So thank you so much for watching this, and stay tuned to India Today Global, where we simplify geopolitics for you.
I know what trending is better than anybody in the world. I've been trending my whole life. From the day I was born, I've been trending.
I like the good publicity and I like the bad publicity. It all plays.
I went to an Ivy League school. I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words.
22 days in a row or something on the cover of the tabloid.